28mm is a very useful focal length for SLR cameras. It is wide enough to open up great shooting opportunities indoors, while also not being that wide as to introduce a lot of distortion into the composition, which is especially important when shooting headshots. There is a reason why smartphone manufacturers have chosen 28mm as the standard focal length for their camera systems. I myself own probably too many 28mm lenses, but I really like them, and one of those lenses I really like is this one. It is the Voigtländer 28mm f2.8 color scoper SLII-S. Voigtländer announced this lens in 2021 and released it shortly afterwards. I immediately bought one. I didn't regret that, as it is an excellent manual focus lens for Nikon F-mount. By sheer coincidence, not long after I bought the Voigtländer, another 28mm manual focus lens for Nikon F-mount found its way into my camera bag, and that's this one. It's the 28mm f2.8 AiS Nikon. This lens was introduced in 1981, and it is very well renowned for its sharpness and color rendition. This lens was actually manufactured until 2005, and my copy is from around 2000-2002, in that time frame. The lens has actually very modern technology built in, for example floating elements, or as Nikon calls it, CRC, close range correction, which allows for good sharpness and contrast even when focusing the lens very close. One important note: the last production run of this lens also had Nikon's SiC super integrated coating, which probably improved the imaging performance even more. So keep that in mind. This one is one generation before that. So now that I had both 28mm lenses for f-mount, I decided to really test them against each other and find out actually which one of those two lenses perform better and which one of those two lenses I like better, because I won't keep two 28mm f2.8 manual focus lenses in my camera bag. So, and that's what this video is about. It's a review, a comparison between these two excellent Nikon F-mount lenses. The all-metal Nikon follows the traditional 1970s design language of Nikon. It features a classic ribbed focusing ring, and the aperture ring has a coupling prong for use with pre-AI bodies. However, it has no CPU chip, which means that it cannot transmit the precise aperture information and subject distance to new Nikon bodies, compromising compatibility with Nikon's advanced flash metering system. The Voigtländer takes styling cues from an even earlier period. Its focusing ring with the ridge and valley design, as well as the coupling prong, makes the lens appear like it was made in the 1960s. However, the similarities are only superficial, as it features a new CPU chip, making it fully compatible with the latest Nikon DSLR bodies, allowing for accurate exposure and flash metering. Both lenses are of very high build quality and nice to operate. I'm under the impression that the Nikon, due to its bigger size and higher weight, takes a little bit more effort to turn the focusing ring. This could also be because of the Voigtländer color scoper being a newer lens. therefore making everything a little bit smoother. Size and weight are important factors when it comes to camera lenses. The Voigtländer is clearly lighter, and the coffee scale helps us to determine by how much. It weighs 203.5 grams approximately, while the Nikon weighs 257 grams. When it comes to size, the Voigtländer again is very compact compared to the Nikon. I would even go as far as to label the Voigtländer as a pancake lens, while the Nikon is more or less sized like a regular lens. This becomes even more apparent when attaching the lens hoods. So the Voigtländer has a special compact lens hood that has to be purchased separately, while the Nikon has this regular HN2 lens hood. This is, by the way, a third-party copy, but it is exactly the same as the original one. So yes, this again makes the Nikon quite a bit bigger, while the Voigtländer remains almost pocketable. Lenses are first and foremost optical instruments, and that's why their optical performance matters the most. As a preamble, it is fair to state that both lenses are excellent, so if you own one or the other, image quality won't be an issue. However, regarding their optical design, they are a little bit different from each other. The Nikon 28mm has 8 lens elements in 8 groups with 7 diaphragm blades, while the Voigtländer has 7 lens elements with 9 diaphragm blades, making for a little bit slimmer design than the Nikon, as you saw previously. Another difference that might matter in practice more than these lens element numbers is actually the fact that the Nikon focuses down to 21 centimeters, which is very close already, but the Voigtländer can go even closer, 15 centimeters that is, without any close-up attachments or anything. The only important thing to keep in mind is that due to the extension, you lose a lot of light in the Voigtländer when you really go down to 15 centimeters. That's very normal. That's what large format photographers call the extension factor or the bellows factor. They usually have to compensate for that more often. If you only shoot small format or full frame, then you're probably not that used to that. But you're gonna see it as the lens really has to extend quite a bit and you lose some light. In any case, I did my standard 3 scenario testing with both lenses, which means I took a close-up shot, I took a medium distance shot, which would be about portrait distance, and an infinity scenario, so which is like a landscape scenario, and usually very good to test how good lenses actually perform. Because infinity is, yeah, that's very tough for many lenses. All right, and now I'm going to show you the results. Let's start by examining the close-up shots. In the top row there are the images taken with the Nikon 28mm and below with the Voigtländer SLII-S. What becomes apparent right away is that the Voigtländer has a slightly wider angle of view than the Nikon. Also, the Voigtländer seems to be half a stop, well, third a stop brighter. The first pair of images is shot wide open at f2.8. Let's zoom in. I focused on the Leica symbol, and by just looking at the images like this, it seems that the Nikon is a little bit sharper. However, this could be an illusion because of the Nikon being a little bit more on the telephoto end of things than the Voigtländer. So it might appear sharper, but it actually might not be sharper. Let's go to the next pair. These two images were shot at f4. On the left hand side is the Nikon. Again, the Nikon appears to be a little bit sharper than the Voigtländer, but also a little bit darker. Very interesting. The next comparison is at f5.6. I'd say right now both appear to be very sharp. There is no considerable improvement by stopping down from this point on, and again the Voigtländer has a little bit better light transmission than the Nikon on the left hand side. The next set of images was shot at around 2 meters. 2 meters is an interesting distance for a 28mm lens, because this would be about the distance you would have to a portrait subject. The first pair. Both lenses at f2.8. Well, I'd say what becomes apparent is that there is not much in terms of bokeh, which is no surprise considering that we are looking at images from 28mm lenses at f2.8. But there is also nothing bad to be said about the bokeh. Zooming in a little bit closer reveals that both lenses provide good sharpness at f2.8 already, and they are virtually indistinguishable. The Nikon has a little bit of a purple cast to it, but that's it. There is a slight improvement in sharpness at f4 for both lenses. Apart from that, they are again identical. Looking at the bokeh, there is also not a real difference. The lenses reach their peak performance already at around f4 in terms of sharpness. Going back to the overview, I want to point out that the vignetting almost disappears when the lenses are stopped down to f4, and it's virtually gone when the lenses are stopped down to f5.6. Both the Voigtländer below and the Nikon above behave very similarly. The last set of images is meant to compare the lens's performance at infinity. Starting at f2.8. On closer examination, it becomes very apparent that the Nikon has purple fringing in the frame and the Voigtländer does not. However, knowing that the Nikon had a little bit of a purple cast in the previous medium test, I'd say we have to move to the frame's edge to make sure that there is a real difference. And this is very interesting. It seems like there is no purple fringing over here. So what we saw earlier was probably not purple fringing, but just a slight purple cast that seems to be part of the characteristic of the Nikon 28mm AiS. because the elements on the extreme outside of the frame don't show any optical defects. If we go to the other side, so right f4 zooming in reveals that both lenses are almost indistinguishable. Only the purple cast or the slight purple cast with the Nikon 28mm remains. Apart from that, no artifacts. Again, the Nikon might be a bit sharper, but it is really hard to tell. It is really hard to tell. This is the last set of images shot at f8. Now with f8 we have a little bit more depth of field, so I think it would make sense to examine the bridge down there. To look for any differences. But really, there are none. After all this testing, it is time to draw a conclusion. As I mentioned in the introduction, I will only keep one of those two lenses, and for me, it is the newer Voigtländer SLII-S color scoper. The reasons are that it is first and foremost lighter and smaller, while also being as capable and as sharp as the Nikon, at least to the degree that matters. As you saw in the optical testing, it was sometimes a little bit inconclusive whether the Voigtländer or the Nikon was actually better, but this means that we already reached a level of sharpness and contrast that it doesn't really matter if there would be any difference. If something performs that good on a 36 megapixel camera, then you are probably good to go for every shooting scenario. Another design aspect I like better about the Voigtländer than the Nikon is the retro design, the all-metal ridge and valley focusing ring. Yeah, I just love that. Also, I don't use these lenses only on Nikon D800 and sorts, but also on my Nikon F3 or my Nikon FM3A. So it's all about the looks then. Another important thing, if you are shooting with studio flashes or TTL especially, then the Voigtländer is really better than the Nikon, as it is fully compatible thanks to its CPU chip. So that's another thing to consider. I don't want to make this sound like the Nikon is not a good lens or not a good choice. It is usually less expensive as it is widely available on the used market, and it is an outstanding performer, especially when considering that this lens is from 1981. So, thanks for watching. Consider following me on Instagram or subscribing on YouTube, and see you next time.